Virgo, something is building toward you. And before I describe what that looks like, before I get into the quality of what's coming, who's bringing it, what it means, I want to stay with something I noticed when I sat with this energy. There's a tiredness in you around confessions, not cynicism, something more earned than that. The specific weariness of someone who has received words before, the right words, the well-intentioned words, the words that arrived with genuine feeling behind them, and then watched the gap between what was said and what followed, between the confession and the behavior, between the explaining and the actual change. And that experience has done something to how you receive declarations now. Something that looks like composure from the outside, that functions as protection from the inside, a slight preemptive distance between you and the words before they even arrive. A part of you that hears, I need to tell you something, and thinks quietly, without drama. Okay, let's see what this actually is. That's not hardness. That's intelligence accumulated through experience. And I don't want to talk you out of it. Let me describe what's happening on their side, because I think the interior of it matters, and I want to be honest about what I'm actually picking up rather than simply building excitement. They've been sitting with something for a while, long enough that the sitting has become uncomfortable in a specific way, not the discomfort of something they want to avoid saying, but the discomfort of something they need to say and haven't found the way into yet. There's a difference. Avoidance has a quality of relief when you stay away from it. What this person is carrying has the opposite quality. Every day they don't say it costs something, gets slightly heavier. Creates an accumulating sense of something unfinished that follows them into other parts of their life. They can't set it down by continuing to not say it. They can only set it down by saying it, and they know that that knowing is what's driving this toward you. Hold on, because there's something about the explain themselves part of the title that I want to examine carefully, since I think it's actually the more significant part, more significant possibly than the confession itself. They want to explain themselves. That phrase, that specific phrase, means something happened that requires explanation, that there's a gap between their behavior and what they feel, between how they've been showing up and what's actually true in their interior, between what you've been experiencing from them and what they want you to understand about the why of it. And I want to sit with what that gap actually is. Because explanations come in different qualities. Some of them are genuine attempts to give someone accurate information about your interior so they can understand you better. Some of them are sophisticated ways of asking for another chance without explicitly asking for another chance. Some of them are both simultaneously genuine in their content, but motivated by something the person hasn't fully examined. What I keep getting from this person is something that's mostly the first thing, mostly genuine, with some of the second thing underneath it, both present, neither canceling the other. There's something specific about what they want to explain, and I want to try to describe it without overstating my certainty, because I'm reading energy rather than reading a transcript of their thought. They want you to understand that what you've experienced from them, the inconsistency, the moments of distance, the times they didn't show up in the way the situation called for, that those things weren't reflections of what they feel, weren't caused by absence of feeling, were in some complicated way they're still working out how to articulate, caused by the presence of too much feeling that they didn't know how to manage. That the problem was never not caring enough. It was caring in a way that exceeded their capacity to handle it without some of it spilling sideways, without it producing behavior that looked from the outside like indifference, like cooling, like pulling back, when actually they were overwhelmed, not by you, by what you produce in them. Wait, I need to pause here because I'm aware that what I just described sounds a lot like the kind of explanation that can be used to reframe problematic behavior into something romantic, and I want to be honest about that. Being overwhelmed by feeling doesn't automatically excuse what the feeling produced. If someone's interior experience of caring too much resulted in behavior that hurt you, in confusion, in the specific damage of inconsistency, in the exhaustion of never knowing which version would show up, then the explanation of why is genuinely important context. But it's not a resolution. It's not the same as things being different going forward. Context explains the past. Only behavior changes the future. And I think the part of you that has developed that preemptive distance from declarations knows this already, knows that the value of a confession isn't in the words, is in what happens after the words. The explaining themselves is the beginning of something, not the thing itself. The more I sit with this, the more I keep finding something about what this person has actually been going through. Some kind of reckoning, not the surface kind, not the passing moment of self-reflection that produces a resolution and then fades. Something that went deeper than that. Something that required them to look at patterns in themselves they'd been avoiding, to sit with the specific question of why they are the way they are in certain moments, why certain things, certain feelings, certain levels of closeness, certain qualities of connection produce in them a response that contradicts what they actually want. That's not easy work, and it doesn't happen quickly. And when people do that work genuinely, when they actually sit with the uncomfortable questions about themselves and stay with them long enough to arrive somewhere more honest, what they produce is different from when they don't. The explanation coming from someone who has done that work is different in quality from the explanation coming from someone who hasn't. What I keep getting is that this person has been in the work, actually in it. Whether they've completed it, whether they've arrived somewhere that would translate into actual different behavior, that's the question that matters. And that's the question the confession alone won't answer. There's an image I keep seeing, someone who has been trying to read something in poor light, moving the paper closer, further away, tilting it toward whatever light source is available, making their best effort to understand what's written from what they can make out in the available illumination. And then someone turns the light on. And what was difficult to read becomes suddenly completely legible. That's what the confession is meant to do. Turn the light on. Make legible what has been difficult to read. Give you the context that makes the pattern make sense. And legibility is valuable. Real, something you've deserved for a while. But here's what I want to say about legibility. It tells you what was written. It doesn't tell you whether what was written is still true going forward, whether the person holding the paper has decided to write something different now, whether understanding the past version changes what comes next. Receive the light and then look clearly at what it illuminates. Not just the explanation, also the person giving it. I want to talk about something specific that you might feel in the moment when this arrives. Relief, the specific, complicated, slightly unwanted relief of something that has been unclear becoming clear, of the specific confusion of this dynamic finally being given a framework of hearing from them in their own words, something that matches the thing you've been sensing but couldn't confirm. That relief is going to be real, and it's going to be one of several things happening simultaneously. There's also going to be something that resembles grief, not dramatic, quiet. The specific small grief of finally knowing what you already intuited but were hoping you'd gotten wrong, of having the ambiguity resolved in a direction that confirms your perception was accurate all along, that the inconsistency was real, that what you felt was real, that you weren't making something out of nothing. You were making something out of something. And the confirmation of that, while relieving in one way, is also the loss of the version of events where you'd misread things, where everything was simpler than it seemed. It wasn't simpler. You were right. There's something I want to say about the timing of this, because I think the when matters as much as the what. This person is coming to you with this now for a reason. And I don't mean that cynically. I don't mean they've calculated that now is the optimal moment for maximum effect. I mean, something genuinely shifted recently that made now the moment where the cost of not saying it exceeded the cost of saying it. Something in their life clarified, or something about your life became visible to them in a way that created urgency. The sense of a window, the specific feeling of someone who has been holding something while the clock runs and who has finally genuinely reckoned with the possibility that the window doesn't stay open indefinitely, and that reckoning produced movement. What I keep getting is that the movement is real, not perfectly formed, not arriving with everything figured out, real. I want to address something directly. You might not know how to respond when this arrives, and I want to say something about that uncertainty that I think is important. Not knowing how to respond immediately is not a problem. It's not a sign that you don't feel enough or feel too much or that the situation is too complicated to navigate. It's the appropriate response to receiving something significant, something that requires genuine processing before a genuine response is possible. You're allowed to hear this and say, I need time with this, not as a rejection, as an honest communication about where you are. Because whatever they're bringing, the confession, the explanation, the wanting to be understood, those things deserve a response that comes from your actual center, from your real assessment of what this means and what you want and what would actually serve you, not from the pressure of the moment, not from the relief of finally having clarity, not from the pull of the warmth that their presence likely produces, from your actual center. And your center sometimes needs a moment to be consulted. Take the moment. There's something about what a genuine response from you looks like that I want to describe, not to script it, to acknowledge that it's going to require something real from you too. Because confession is a two-way thing when it's actually working. They're going to tell you something true, and the invitation underneath the telling, the thing they're actually reaching for, is some version of your truth in return. Not necessarily the same truth, not necessarily reciprocal feeling in equal measure, but your actual, honest, this is where I am response to what they've shared. And that response requires you to know where you are, which means before this arrives, or in the space after it arrives, before you respond, there's something worth doing. A quiet, honest accounting of your own interior. What do you actually feel about this person? Not what's complicated or confusing or mixed underneath all of that. What's actually there, because they're coming to you with theirs. And the most valuable thing you can offer in return Is yours real, unmanaged? Even if what it says is, I need more time, or I feel this, but I need to see different behavior, or I don't know yet and I'm not going to pretend otherwise. All of those are honest. All of those are worth more than a response calibrated for the moment. The last thing, they're planning to explain themselves, and explanations, real ones, the kind that come from genuine self examination, deserve to be received with the respect of your full attention, your real listening, your actual presence, rather than the managed, slightly preemptive presence you've developed as protection in this dynamic. Not because they've earned unconditional openness, because you deserve the experience of actually hearing something before you decide what it means. Not filtering it through the protective distance before it lands, letting it land, and then from the clearer ground of having actually received it, deciding what you think, what you feel, what you want. That sequence matters. Receive first, then assess, because the assessment you make after genuine receiving is more accurate than the one you make from behind the glass. And accuracy in all things, but especially in things that matter, is the thing you've always been most committed to. Use it here, on yourself as much as on them. If something in this touched something true, if a moment landed somewhere you needed it to, I'd love to hear from you in the comments. Tell me what resonated, even just a few words. It means more than you know.